talking Terror Trips, also known as On Location, and this one is written and directed by Jeff Seaman. Now, does Jeff Seaman produce a potent mix of horror thriller, or does Jeff Seaman stain the horror movie industry? Let's discuss. So this movie focuses on a group of entrepreneurs who decide they're going to go into this kind of business venture where it's got something to do with kind of going to famous locations in horror movies and kind of creating some type of event there. And at the beginning of the movie we see a variety of kind of different horror locations, including Horror House, LLC, and among others. And they eventually end up in Poland, where there's this kind of site of this kind of underground horror movie that they've kind of, you know, been exposed to and kind of want to have a look there. But they come across some locals who have different ideas and may have cruel intents to our unlucky Americans. Now, what will happen? You'll have to watch the movie and find out. So, do you like the movie Hostel? Do you want more of it, but on a lower budget? Because if the answer is yes, check out Terror Trips. Because it almost feels like a kind of low budget spin-off of Hostel in a lot of ways. Yes, we've got a group of kind of Americans that go to Eastern Europe, well, arguably Central Europe, but you know, that's depending on who you ask really, and coming across some, as I say, some kind of locals here who have ill intent towards them, albeit the reasons for them doing these kind of things are a little different compared to Hostel, but it's kind of amounts to the kind of the same type of movie. So if torture porn is your thing, by a guy called Jeff Seaman, then this may be the movie for you. Let's talk about what I think works in this movie. Okay, I have to say, and this one does actually, I think, have something in common with Hostel. One of the reasons I think Hostel was quite effective as a horror film is a little bit like the same reason Eden Lake was effective. Because it's not a movie that's kind of out of the realms of possibilities. You're looking at human cruelty in its kind of purest form, and the dehumanization of individuals. It has this kind of fear factor, if you like, that you can think this could happen. And I'm not going to go into what our kind of antagonists are actually kind of doing, because I don't want to kind of spoil it for you, but suffice to say, it's a kind of a horrific thing that does happen, you know. So it does have this kind of legitimate kind of feel, very much like, I think, you know, the original Hostel movie kind of put people off going to Eastern Europe, and I remember there being a big hoo-ha from the kind of the tourist, the tourist kind of tourism community, because it kind of put people off from going to Eastern European countries and things like that. But it has that legitimate thinking, well, this is a sort of thing that isn't in the, you know, it's not an impossible kind of situation. You know, it's not an immortal masked madman chasing you or anything like that. This is a kind of a situation that could kind of really happen and is as horrific as anything you kind of see in these kind of, more fantastical movies and stuff like that. So it kind of benefits from having that same type of realistic threat of danger than I think movies, as I say, like Hostel, like kind of Eden Lake had before it really. So there is a kind of a palpable sense of fear in this movie, I would say. And I have to say, our antagonists get a reasonable amount of screen time. When I was watching it, I wasn't quite expecting to have so much kind of screen time. So you almost, not to the degree of a protagonist, but you almost feel like you get to know some of the kind of the inner workings of our group of kind of antagonists. And again, I'm trying to be vague here without kind of giving away anything too much about what the actual plans are here. But suffice to say, there is an organisation kind of involved, and it's maybe a lot more kind of organised and maybe widespread than you might initially kind of think. And you know, I like the fact that we did get a little peek behind the curtain about kind of what these people are actually up to, and kind of what their kind of personalities are like, and even a little bit of kind of personal kind of drama involved as well, which I thought was kind of quite good. The movie's not nearly as kind of gory or kind of brutal as Hostel, but there is still a couple of shots here that I do think are quite effective in regards to some kind of kills. And our group of protagonists, unlike a lot of kind of movies, they're not a kind of you know, a broad kind of mix of people. You know, a lot of these films you get the jock, the slutty girl, the innocent, you know, all those kind of things. They're all kind of more or less a bunch of geeks, if I'm going to be completely honest. So they're actually quite similar in a lot of ways, which makes that, again, it has a slightly different kind of flavour than a lot of these movies, I think, because you feel like this group of people seem like a legitimate kind of group of people that would kind of hang out, rather than the broad kind of like different types of kind of character classes, if you will, that you get in a kind of a lot of kind of horror movies. And I will say, at least I think in the middle section of this movie, I was quite enthralled with the plot. Seeing maybe, you know, who's going to get out alive, if anyone, and things like that. I was quite interested where the plot was going. You'll notice I say just the kind of the middle section here. And now let me jump onto what I think doesn't work. Okay, so the movie's title, Terror Trips, and even its kind of previous title, On Location, and the kind of the first act of the movie is about these kind of guys who are, you know, they're kind of basically seeking out kind of horror hotspots, horror kind of like movie kind of locations and things like that. Has nothing to do with the actual plot. You know, it's kind of this thing where you think it's going to be an integral part of the kind of the movie and be a big part of it. It isn't. I mean, they kind of go to this kind of like sort of Polish kind of out of the way place because there's this underground movie, but there's no other kind of reason that kind of whole thing's kind of dropped after. It doesn't really inform the plot out after that, just for a reason to get our kind of group of characters to this kind of town. But that could have literally been any reason. It could have been a stag do. It could have been a holiday. It could have been a camping trip. The actual reason why they actually go to this kind of small Polish community is somewhat arbitrary, to be honest with you. But the actual titles of the movie, the kind of the beginning where we see these kind of groups of people kind of showing off their kind of horror knowledge and about how they're going to go visit all these kind of like horror locations, nothing is done with it. And I have a couple of other thoughts on that. So I wonder if that was kind of an excuse to go to these kind of locations and an excuse to kind of put them on the movie. Oh yeah, it's an integral part of the movie. It isn't. And that leads me to another issue I have with this movie, is it kind of introduces things and then doesn't do anything with them. For example, that is the kind of the first one. But then we have a kind of, again, I'm going to be vague here, but we have this kind of development within our kind of antagonists, where there's something that happens that creates some friction between a couple of members of our antagonists. I thought, oh, is this going to be something interesting that happens between our kind of antagonists? No. Literally nothing is done with it. Just why even bother? And let's talk about our group of people, because, you know, the beginning of the movie is telling us how kind of like how informed this kind of group of horror enthusiasts are. Because imagine having a conversation where you're talking about something, and there's always that person that's done something better, or, you know, or kind of knows a bit more than you and things like that, and always feels they have to tell you. The movie kind of comes across a little bit like that. And then another issue that I have with this kind of thing as well is that, you know, we have this kind of group of people that are so into horror movies. They try and be a little bit meta and make commentary about their kind of situation and go, oh, it feels like a horror movie because one of our parties going missing and we shouldn't split up. And again, you're thinking, oh, is this going to inform part of the story? Are they going to use their knowledge, you know, of kind of horror movies to try and not do some of the kind of the cliche things that you see in horror movies, a little bit like Scream started to do? No, they still do the same kind of cliches. Let's split up. Let's talk about the acting. I think the thing that I think people would jump on the most of this movie is the acting is quite poor. You know, I don't like to kind of jump on individuals, but the majority of the cast, I would say, are subpar at best to terrible at worst. There is some really kind of cringy acting here, and I'm going to point out there's a couple of people that I think do a better job, but the majority, I would say, are on the weaker side. And then we kind of talk about the ending, which I don't think it kind of stuck the landing here. I understand what the filmmakers were trying to do here, because they wanted to avoid particular kind of cliches, I think, and decided to go for a type of without saying what it is, a kind of middle ground about maybe you know, and a particular kind of outcome. So they try to go for this particular kind of, let's call it a middle ground, and it ends up being, oh, well, you know, maybe it should have gone one of the two more obvious ways, but it kind of goes in this kind of like this third option, which I don't think it seems particularly kind of unsatisfying in a kind of a way, and a little bit sort of like drawn out and silly. And I got to say, when we are introduced to our Polish characters, again, I'm going to be trying to be vague here. There isn't much variety in their kind of what they are wanting from life. Let me just put it like this. I think it needed to have a little bit more. You know, people maybe having different ideas about things. Again, it might seem vague. I'm trying not to spoil things here. You'll get what I mean, because there you go. I still had some enjoyment with this movie. Like I've said, I think the actual plot is kind of like, it really is just like Hostel. It really is. So if you like Hostel, and I do like Hostel, this is kind of a you know, a lower budget homage, you might say. So I'll give this one a 4 out of 10. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? Leave me a comment, and I'll look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.